Hey everyone, this is Zephyr, and welcome to the Bailiwiki Chin, where we teach everyday DMs how to create truly amazing experiences for their players by combining art and technology. We also make modular systems and scenes that you can use without any setup. And our latest release for Foundry VTT is going to be the backdrop for today's episode of Foundry Basics. This is maybe more of a Foundry Intermediates episode today because we're diving into creating our own module. Modules are a fantastic way to be able to share content, either with yourself or with other people in the Foundry community. And today we're going to be diving into Foundry's built-in module creation tool that lets you create content modules incredibly easily. If you've ever wanted to share maps and scenes or other resources across your different worlds or servers, then this video is for you. This process is surprisingly easy, so come along as we walk through creating our own module and loading it up with content to share. To get started with creating a module, we'll first go to the add-on module section of our setup screen. And there's a button right here to the right of our Update All section that is Create Module. And this is going to give us the basic details that we're going to fill out here. So the first thing we'll want is our title, and this is going to be the name as it appears in our manage modules, etc. And so for this, we're just going to do a sample module or something similar. Then package identifier is going to be all lowercase, and there's going to be no spaces and should have hyphens in it. And this is going to be the name for the package as we define it with other modules, etc. And this will also be the name of the folder that all the files are stored in. Package version you can name however you like. By default, it's going to be version 1.0. If you're planning on distributing this in any way, then you may want to put in the package URL for your website, etc. if you want people to have other places to go to learn more about your project. And then package description is what it says on the tin. This is going to be just a description of the module when people look it up in the add-on module browser if you are publishing it. Otherwise, you can use it as some internal basis and it will show up depending on certain views in your add-on module browsers. So this is just an example for the Foundry Basics episode here. Right at the bottom, we've got compatibility, and I would in general recommend that you don't mess with this in the creation section here. You're going to put in your minimum version and your verified version. In general, you can't put in a minimum version that is prior to the version that you're actually creating the module on. Right now I'm doing this on Foundry version 12, so I can't actually go back to Foundry version 11 with this. So our minimum version is going to stay 12. Our verified version is the one we're working on right now. You could specify a maximum version if you don't want to be able to activate this or install this beyond the current version you're working on. Next up, you'll do authors. And here you can just add in yourself. And you don't necessarily need to fill in these parts unless you are going to be adding this for public consumption via the Foundry VTT module browser. Since you have your authors filled out, it's time to do compendium packs. And here, when you add a pack, you can remove it by clicking this minus. And then you want to set up the labels and names. So this is going to be, say, example scenes. And then we'll set the document type to the appropriate document, in this case, scenes. And if it has a required system, we'll specify that here. Scenes don't. So we can go ahead and add as many of these packs as we want. In general, in this phase, I would recommend that you err on the side of making more packs than you need rather than too few of packs. We can always remove these later down the line. So go ahead and complete as many of these as you would like and make sure that you have plenty for all of the content you're going to store. When you've finished creating all of your compendium packs, you'll notice that for actors and adventures, you do have to specify a required system. If I was setting this module up to have actor compendiums for multiple different systems, I can go ahead and add an additional actor compendium and specify a different system. This is going to mean that if I am playing on a world with Dungeons and Dragons, I'll have one actor compendium, but not the other. And on Crucible, I would have the opposite. So I would miss the Dungeons and Dragons actor compendium, but I would get the Crucible compendium instead. And that's how this required system works for all of the modules. For the purposes of just sharing things between my worlds, I'm only going to specify D&D 5th edition here. Note that you can also add adventure type compendiums here that allow you to link a bunch of things together and build out these really nice compendiums and links everywhere. That's not necessary for sharing things just between your own worlds. If you're looking to distribute content at a wider scale, then that might be something worth looking into. But adventure compendiums and building out adventures, etc., is a slightly more involved process that we're not going to cover here today. Let us know if you would like us to do a video dedicated to the adventure type of compendiums. Once all of our compendiums are taken care of, we're going to go to relationships. This is an optional step here where you're going to add dependencies and recommendations on modules. If you're using this yourself, you probably don't need to worry about this if you're just using it for sharing content between your worlds. But if you're thinking you might distribute this or you want reminders for yourself, then this is how you do it. When you hit plus, it's going to give you a drop down of all of the menus and systems that you have. So I know, for instance, I'm going to be using some multi-leveled maps. So I'll add levels as a dependency here. And you can see there's 3 categories: required, recommended, and known conflict. Known conflict basically just gives people a warning. And then recommended is going to have people get the option to install and enable the recommended module. And then required means that your module cannot be enabled without also enabling its dependencies. So anything that's required has to be on in order for your module to be turned on. I'm also using some token magic effects. So I'll go ahead and set that as required as well. And maybe I'll add a recommended module in here for Monk's active tile triggers. Again, if you are doing this just for sharing content between your world or your servers and you're not distributing, this is maybe less necessary, but it's a good reminder to make sure that you're actually bringing in all of the modules that you need. Then when you're ready, go ahead and select Create Module. And then Sample Module is now available to use. Notice that if we search for it, it pops up right there. With that module created, one thing that I think is helpful here is to go ahead and launch a world. And this will be the world that we're housing our content in. And I'm going to first activate this module. So we're going to look for our sample module. You'll also notice from my active modules, I don't have a whole lot turned on here. I'm trying to keep it as minimal as possible. I'm going to hit Save Settings. We'll go ahead and reload. And we can double check now we've got this example journal entries, example actors. We'll go ahead and create a folder for these two. So we have all of our compendiums right here, and there's nothing inside of them at the moment. Now, before we start moving everything in there, let's take a look at the file structure for the module itself. So I've navigated to where my Foundry data folder is. This is specified in your setup, and inside that there is a data subfolder to it. And within that, if I click on modules, we'll have all of the different modules that I have installed on here, including our sample module here. Clicking on that, you'll see that we have the module.json, and if we open that up in VS Code, we can see that this has all the different fields that we need. We'll come back to this later as we discuss different things you can do to further improve and modify your module.json when we're close to buttoning things up. But for now, let's return here. If we're going to be moving things between servers or we're going to be distributing this in any way, then we want to also have any art assets or sound assets, etc., that we're going to be leveraging for this module and for the things inside the compendiums housed inside of the module itself. If we link things to just inside of the world, or for example, here I have an assets folder for my Foundry data. If I link to things there, then that means anyone I give this module to, or when I move this to a different server, I'll also have to have the assets folder there, and I'll have to have everything in the exact same file structure with the exact same naming convention. So first, I'm going to go to my sample module, and I'll go ahead and add in a new folder for things like tiles, and also for tokens and maps for like scene backgrounds, etc. You don't necessarily have to have tiles and maps separately, but these should be thematic and easy to follow and understand what's going to be in there. There is a great media optimization guide available on Foundry's website in the knowledge base section. I highly recommend you take a look at that when it comes to figuring out how you want to name and structure things. Important takeaways are having self-explanatory file and folder names, and make sure you're not using unnecessary symbols in your naming convention. In general, if you stick to all lowercase and instead of spaces, you use dashes in the names, you're going to be pretty safe. Returning back to this, I have added a few sections here, and we'll go ahead and also add sounds section. And this is where we're going to ultimately move all of the assets that we need for our maps and tokens, etc. into. So with that, let's go ahead and go back into Foundry and let's take a look at where we need to put things. All right, so we're back in Foundry and I have these 4 scenes here. These are going to be taken from the latest release of the Bailiwiki modules, but obviously if you are creating scenes to share between your worlds, you would create your own using your assets, etc. As a demonstration here, I have changed this into a single combined tile using Media Optimizer, and I have this tile living inside of my assets folder. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my file browser, and I am then going to go back into my data section, and in assets where I have my tile combiner set up, I'm going to go ahead and move this file into the module. And we'll go ahead and put this into maps, and you also probably want to rename this. So for instance, this will be Village Bridge 01. And so this is Village Bridge 01 combined. And again, I'm using all lowercase with dashes to separate words here to make sure that it is nice and media friendly. Now, if I refresh, because I've actually moved that file out, you'll notice that we got a big old missing tile error here. And this would also happen if you were to move this onto a server and you didn't move over these assets to that server. So I'm going to go ahead and change this tile and point it to the correct location within my module. So in modules, scroll down to my sample module here that I've made. And then we have it in maps, and select that file and go ahead and update the tile. And now we'll see that everything is all great. Typically speaking, you would repeat this process for all of the tiles that you're using, all of the map backgrounds, etc., and put them all into that same module folder. There's faster and easier ways to do this. For example, using mass edit, you can quickly change the file locations for everything and make that a little bit easier for yourself. If you are going to keep this just on the same server and you're not actually going to be moving this, say, from your local machine to a hosted server on Oracle or AWS or on the Forge, then you don't need to worry about this part of the process as much. You can just leave it in a generic assets folder that you have. But I wanted to show you the whole process here. You would then repeat this with all of the different assets that you need to do it for. Again, that's mainly if you're distributing this or moving servers with it. And then when you're ready, we're going to go ahead and open up our compendiums, and we'll want to make sure that we toggle these edit locks. And this is going to actually edit the module directly. So once we add things to this compendium, it's being saved into the module files themselves, and we'll be able to move it around, open it in other worlds, etc. So we can either upload these things individually, or we can also create a folder and move them inside of the folder in order to import them all at once. So as you could see earlier, we could do the click and drag. We can also right click and export to compendium, which is going to give us the destination pack option here. For example scenes, you can leave the folder blank if there's no folders in here, but it is going to go ahead and bring it all over. Now, I recommend that you keep the document IDs, which is going to have the unique identifier for each scene here preserved. This is mainly helpful if you're using things like journal entries that have links to scenes or actors, etc. This will help preserve the IDs there. So we'll go ahead and export the content. And then when it's done, we have these nice scenes here, and we can create a new folder if we want to reorganize them, etc. When you go to export a folder, even if you say keep folder structure, it's going to keep the internal folders here, not the home folder per se. So once our scenes are done, we can repeat this process for all of the other entries we have. So here we've got actors, and I'm going to take this NPC that I created. He's got his stats and his features, etc. And we'll go ahead and move him into our example actors, and then we'll also do the same for our journal entry. Now, as a demonstration here for the journal entry, I'm actually going to go ahead and edit this, and we'll add in a link to something. So we kept the IDs from these scenes, so we'll go ahead and pop this in, and we will just say something like a scene. And then I also want to show a reference to something in a compendium, which is probably your best practice, because you'll notice that this UUID here is just for the scene itself. And it's going to not actually fill in if we leave the scene in a compendium. So we've put that village bridge link there. If you want to link something in a compendium, which means that a person wouldn't need to have it imported in order for the link to work, then you'll want to actually have the item you're referencing in question put into your compendiums, and then you'll drag from the compendium in order to create that link. You'll notice that now this has compendium dot and then our module name and the pack name and then the scene here. So this is going to be preserved when we save it and close. You'll notice that we've got Village Bridge 01 here and Village Bridge 01 here as well. And this is going to be the compendium version. You can see it has import. And this is going to be the non-compendium version that's in our world. When we're happy with that journal entry, we'll go ahead and put it into the compendium here. And for most items, when you left click on them, you will be able to actually edit them. You'll see we have the import up at the top, but we can make changes to this while it's still in the compendium. And that's not going to affect the one that's in the world here. So if I change this and we put in, lorem ipsum here and save, notice that's changed in our compendium, but not in our world. So I've loaded up my other test world here, and if I go into my manage modules, I can find that sample module again. And once I save it, I'll have to reload. So after that quick reload, if we go over to our compendiums, we'll see here on my test world, I now have the 3 example compendiums. Opening it up, and you'll have all of the entries within those compendiums. When it comes to getting those entries into our world, we've got kind of 4 options. First, if we left click on the entry, there's going to be this little import button that you can use. And we'll see that we now have test example scene imported here. We can then also right click to import the entry, and that will bring it in individually. And we can also drag and drop to bring that in individually. Similarly, if you have a folder, you can drag and drop the entire folder in. And then finally, if we right click, we can import all content, which is going to give us an option to put it into a specific folder. And also if we want to keep the IDs, etc. So let's take a quick look at this journal entry that we were discussing earlier. If we open this up, you'll notice that the compendium version works just fine, but this scene version does not. If you need this link to be working, then you need to go through a specific process. You'll notice that if we bring in the Village Bridge 01 here and I close and reopen the journal entry, it's still broken. And the reason for that is if you just do the click and drag or the import from the compendium here on this individual entry, it's going to generate a new ID when it imports. So to fix that, we can go ahead and delete the old version. And then when we come down here on example scenes, when we go to import all content, we have the option to keep document IDs. And when we have the keep document IDs turned on, it's going to preserve the ID from the compendium to the world here. So now we have the example scene section. And if we open up this journal entry, we'll see that the Village Bridge 01 exists. So we can see that our configuration is open and everything right here. We can't edit this from within the journal entry because it's still inside of a locked compendium, but we have all of those links incorporated. And so we'd use this to bring in all of the different pieces that we need. We can bring in all of those aspects, and you might be sharing more or less with yourself, etc. But we can see if we go into our scenes and this Village Bridge 01, this is the one that we set up the new background for. We moved it around. See that it is in fact pointing to our module and everything is working just fine. If I open up my levels interface, I've got all of the levels that I want. So everything here is looking good. And that is a quick and dirty way to be able to share the compendiums and the maps across your worlds. Now that we've reviewed our content, we've verified that it works in another world, we have all of our links working properly, let's go ahead and finish this up by taking a look at our module.json. This is more of a review process and is probably not strictly necessary if you're just using this to share content with yourself. But if you're thinking about releasing this to the public in the future, then you may want to make a couple changes. One thing is that you absolutely never want to adjust this ID field. This is really important for where everything is linked. Again, it's going to be the name of the folder that the module exists in. If you change the ID here, it's going to be looking in the wrong place. You're not going to be able to activate the module, etc. So just never touch that. But what you can change is the title here. For example, if you want this to be Zephyr's sample module, you can do that here. You can also update your version numbers as you go, and also update your compatibility and your relationships, etc. By looking through here, you can get a pretty good sense of how this is structured. For example, we've got the relationships field here where we have the ID, type, and compatibility for the different modules that we're using here. So if you want to add additional ones, it's as simple as just copying and pasting these sections and then modifying the ID. And this ID here, again, corresponds to the ID at the top of your module.json. So the ID for our module is sample module. If we were referencing something like BaileyWiki nuts and bolts, we would use the ID from that module. And you can find that by opening up the module.json or looking into the different files, etc. So you can use that to expand your relationship section. You can update your authors. And when it comes to your compendium packs, if there's a pack that you've determined, no, I don't actually need this, I'm going to go ahead and delete the journal entries, you can simply just delete it, and then you're good to go. If you want to rename a pack, you can also do the same thing. Here, you want to adjust the label field and not the name or path fields. You can also adjust things like ownership. For example, maybe players should have no ownership as opposed to observer, etc. And if you want to add additional compendiums, then you can copy and paste in a compendium. And you'll want to update it to be the appropriate types, etc. You can review the different types of compendiums on the FoundryVTT website and figure out what needs to happen for each of those. An important note is that the actual folder for the packs and the compendium isn't going to show up in your Foundry world until you've restarted Foundry. That's then when the module is going to generate that compendium. When we're all happy with the module, then we are good to copy and paste this particular module folder into the modules directory of our other server, or we can go ahead and compress it by sending it to a compressed zip folder. And this module, sample module.zip, is what we would need if we're going to be distributing this publicly. If you're going to distribute publicly, you're going to have a way for folks to download it. And so typically that's going to be GitHub, GitLab, or in some rare cases, you might use something like Google Drive or a separate website like Oracle Cloud or Amazon Web Services where you're hosting it. And you'll need to have this zip file that is the ID of your module, so the exact folder name, .zip, and then you'll also have to have your module.json in there pointing to where the download is. There's some more information on setting up your module for distribution and also the actual application process for having it listed in the add-on module browser on Foundry's website. So you can check those out on screen now, and then there's also links in the description if you're interested in learning more about that. That's going to conclude our discussion of creating modules using Foundry's built-in module creation tool to share your content. This is a great tool to have in your back pocket, whether it's sharing it with yourself amongst the worlds on your server, across your servers, or with the masses via the Foundry add-on module browser. It's a fantastic way to have different test copies or easily replicable stores of common information that you use. whether that's a bunch of journal entries with your house rules or your lore for the same setting that you use, or a bunch of scenes that you find yourself coming back to over and over again. It's a fantastic way to keep all of that nice and organized and safe and easy to access across any place you may be using Foundry VTT. Let us know if you found this helpful and what questions you may have for us, especially if you'd like to see that upcoming video on adventures and adventure compendiums. Once again, this has been Zephyr with the BaileyWiki channel. If you enjoyed this video, then subscribe to keep up with all of our latest content and hit the bell to make sure that you never miss a new video. And consider becoming a patron. Not only do you support the channel, but you also gain access to all the modular systems and scenes like the ones we've showed off in this video today. Again, it's been Zephyr. Thank you so much for watching, happy gaming, and have a good one.